My name is Jon Stevens, and I'm the Senior Managing Director at Teach For America.
Well, Jon, great to see you again. Always a pleasure to meet up with you to learn about the latest activities with Teach For America. But before we do that, and you talk about some of the new programs you are operating, tell us a little bit for the viewers that perhaps don't know about Teach For America. Tell us what the group is all about and how long they've been in the Valley.
Sure. So Teach For America, we believe that education can open doors for students, can provide opportunities, can help students to realize their dreams. But unfortunately, our educational system doesn't always provide those opportunities for young people in our community. And so Teach For America, we look to find leaders, to develop leaders, and support those leaders over the course of their career to work towards advancing educational opportunities. Here in the Rio Grande Valley, we've been partnering with local school districts in the community since 1991, so for a while, and we've grown our programs and our offerings over time. And we've seen the tremendous results of when you have a committed teacher, when you have a warm, welcoming classroom, and when you have rigorous expectations that students can achieve at really high levels. And one thing I think is exciting about Teach For America is our national CEO is actually from the Valley. And she was in a classroom, and so I think back to what her educational experience was, and all of the students who are in classrooms now that are served by teachers and educators, and who are going to be those great leaders, not just locally but nationally in the future. And that's the value of Teach For America, I think, is unlocking that talent in all of our young people.
So if you've been in the Valley since '91, where did the group originally start? Which part of the US, and how long ago was that?
So it started just 1 year before. So we're one of the, I would say, almost original regions, the Rio Grande Valley. So Teach For America came to Texas in 1991. In Houston and Rio Grande Valley, we are the founding regions in Texas. And so we've had a journey, as any nonprofit organization has, of the founding and the growing and the maturing and evolving. And I think that while we've been here for a while, one of the things about Teach For America is we believe that we always must be updating our approach towards teaching, our approach towards what education is for students, and how do we support educators. And that has been never more clear than the last few years. And from everything from the initial response to COVID and virtual school, our teachers, many of our teachers, if not the majority, are pretty young and recently out of college. And so they're able to adapt to technology pretty quickly. And we saw that in their classroom and their virtual instruction. And now what we're seeing is, with generational shifts in the workplace, as a lot of people might be experiencing Teach For America, we have to adapt really, really quickly. So how do we be digital first? How do we be customized? How do we be a program that allows young people to choose to make teaching a career, coming potentially right out of college? And so as a result, we're constantly shifting our training approach. One exciting thing that's new is that we were able to hold, for the first time ever, our summer school training here in the Valley last summer. And so we had some of the components online that were virtual, again, adaptive to what young people want, but then many of the components live, including working with veteran teachers in PSJA ISD, where they worked in summer school instruction last summer. So it was, I think, a great melding of one of the track records of Teach For America has been the strength of our initial teacher training, but updating it with both technology and updating it to be both local here in the region.
And going back to when you first started out in this area, 1991, did the group ever explain why they chose the Valley?
So historically, the Valley has been an underserved area when it comes to educational opportunities. When you look back into the Texas Education Agency records, that was the era right when we were starting to get data about different parts of the state. And one of the most interesting facts, and who knows if this is a clerical error, but if you look back to some of those first years, you actually don't see data on the Rio Grande Valley. And so it was one of the areas that was so underserved that even initially when they started data tracking systems, there weren't measurements at first. But what we do know is that historically the Valley, our economy, and the opportunities for students were limited because what the opportunities were that required, even a high school degree, and especially beyond a high school degree, were limited. And so our schools were set up that way, in that there were large chunks of students who weren't told to dream big, who weren't given opportunities for the most rigorous courses. And so a lot of the early history of Teach for America is the journey of the Valley as well, of that growing and that maturation and the changing of what the dreams and hopes and expectations are for students. And we've seen that now over the last, I want to say 15 years, because it's been a while now where we're reorienting towards thinking about a high school diploma is not the only goal, but what is it that's going to set people up in life to have a job, that they can have choices, that they can earn a living, they can raise a family. And we know that that's likely something beyond a high school degree. And so I think Teach for America, as we've grown over time, we've been able to be a partner to school districts, to have educators, to always be evolving and providing new offerings for students.
So did you tell us how many teachers are here in the Valley because of your group?
So currently our program is well known for early career teachers. So in their first and second year teaching, we have about 50 teachers. We work across Starr, Cameron, and Hidalgo County, and so we're Valley-wide. And then we have 200 former members here we call alumni. And so alumni of our program, they get to continue to develop their career and apply their values and their leadership in service of students and education. Primarily, that is as a classroom teacher, a school-based personnel potentially working for a school district. And so we have many, many teachers who've been teaching. Some are retiring from our earlier cohorts. Some are leading schools. One of the big areas of interest that likely you're hearing is providing social emotional support to students. And so we have people who are pursuing counseling degrees and other types of support like that for students. And so Teach for America, our programs are meant to support both beginning career educators as well as help with career development for those former members of our program too.
So I know that Teach for America is highly regarded in the world of education here in the Valley. So I would imagine a seat at the table when big policy decisions are contemplated. So that being the case, if that's correct, what would you say the state of public education is in the Valley? Because we hear a lot of plaudits that Valley schools are very good. They get a lot of awards. They're always highly rated, and our scores generally are as good as anywhere else in the state. But with you having a bit of a detached view, but also being knowledgeable on all the changes that are happening in education, what would you say the state of Valley education is today?
Sure. So our executive director is Ana Gonzalez, not me, and that's okay. But we work closely together, and
Your title is again?
Senior Managing Director.
Oh.
We work closely.
So did I relegate you there or promote you?
You promoted me there.
Okay. Please tell Ana that I'm sorry.
But I bring Ana up because Ana does serve and sit in different spaces where she's able to provide that insider-outsider perspective, where we're working with public educators, but we're not a system that is, a public education system. And so I think that allows us to see the bright spots, and some of the bright spots are the fact that our systems in many ways are set up to provide mass access to opportunities for students that then students and families have to choose to walk down those pathways, right? But there's more and more opportunities than ever for students. I think some of the challenges that we continue to see are, these are not unique to the Valley necessarily, but students feeling connected to school and seeing how their education is going to connect to the opportunities that they want in the future. And so that's been a challenge of reconnecting students back to the classroom. And I think to some extent, that's because we've reverted back to certain practices that don't serve students anymore. And so if you take a kid at home and you allow them to figure out ways to accelerate their learning or figure out things flexibly, give them options, give them technology tools, and then we bring them back and try to have them do things a different way, we are seeing students who are unengaged and might show up as not motivated. They're not maybe motivated about, maybe they're excited about a topic if they would explore it and learn it in a different way. So I think at Teach for America, we're really trying to think through what are the ways that how learning happens needs to be reinvented and changed. And so I think some of the things that we do believe strongly are that we need to ensure that there's a certain amount of mindfulness in education for both teachers and students. And so by that we mean that students are really thinking about how are they showing up when they come into classroom? What was their weekend like? Were there stressors? Were there different things going on in their life? You don't leave that at the classroom door. And so strong teachers can allow students to process that and then move forward with rigorous academics. How do we think about leadership development? How do we think about how teachers are valued and how teachers can have certain degree of autonomy in their profession that can be fulfilling and rewarding over the long term? How do we also think of students that way? How are we asking for students' input? There's a lot of things they can see out there on their own, and you can't hide things from students anymore, but it's how do you teach them to engage in a responsible way with that information? And finally, how do we do all of this equitably? How do we ensure that while there are great plaudits in aggregate for our schools in the Valley, where are we seeing gaps? Where are we seeing certain groups of students who are not achieving at their full potential? And so that also Teach for America, I think our role is how do we measure the right stuff? How do we use it in the right way to support students and to not penalize? And then how do we ensure that we adequately resource schools to serve our students in the Valley? So I think those are some of the things, both from like a practitioner standpoint at Teach for America, but also from a policy standpoint, that we try to support school districts and advocate for any policy that will enable that to be true.
So how disruptive was the COVID pandemic on schools and children, teachers, and has everyone in the industry recovered?
So, you can look at like the macro level research, and it shows that the math loss was the most than reading. So there's been very intentional things to accelerate math instruction. One of the things that we actually launched at Teach for America is a virtual tutoring program we call our Ignite Fellowship. And the Ignite Fellowship is a high dosage tutoring program, which the research shows that you have to have a certain amount of minutes each week, regular commitment relationship of a tutor and a student. And so we deliver this virtually. It allows us to recruit college students. Right now we piloted it and launched it in Harlingen CISD, and so we're working with students in 5 classrooms at 2 middle schools this year. And that's really focused on that learning acceleration from the learning loss. So we're seeing the state, if you look at the data, they've made up some of that gap in math last year. Hopefully more will be made up this year. Reading loss and growth is slower both ways, right? So in terms of looking at the standardized test, I think beyond that though, I think again the biggest things, if you talk to educators and we talk to educators in our network and more broadly, is that the students' wants and desires for their educational experience are just different. And so some schools are changing how they approach instruction and how they interact with students, and some those changes are slower to come about. And so I would say that's the biggest thing in terms of recovery, or I would say reinvention coming out of the pandemic, is that there are certain things that I think need to adapt in terms of the classroom experience for students. And we see that happening with our teachers when they're able to motivate students and make them be their best. And then unfortunately you see examples where attendance rates in Texas have been much lower on this side of the pandemic than they were before. There's a lot of reasons why that's true. But if you just purely look at some of the motivation and desire to show up to school every day, there definitely have been some long-term impacts on students' motivation and connections to schools. And we're not going to see the full effects of those until later on, right? As they're entering or not entering higher ed, as they're entering or not entering the workforce. And so I think some of the short-term pieces, we've seen some recovery, and I think that it's yet to be determined what we see with some of the longer-term impacts.
And that program that you started in Harlingen, how is that going?
So the fall we were at 1 school and we expanded to 2 schools this spring, and so we're able to see there are dual purposes of that. One is the learning acceleration, so we could see the learning growth, and so we're seeing the growth that's happening. Second piece is belonging, is a specific goal around we survey the students on my teacher helped me learn best, my teacher listened to me, my teacher cares about me. I feel motivated, in my studies, those types of questions, and we're seeing a lot of progress on those because you have the attention of adult who cares. Their teacher cares about them, yes, but when you're in small groups, you're able to achieve some different results. And so that's the challenge of a teacher. Is it's very challenging to be a teacher right now because you have to do those dual aims, right? You have the accountability for the academic results what students must achieve, but that's only supported when you have the classroom environment that's welcoming, that's supportive, that's inclusive. And those are the classrooms where we're seeing students thrive the most.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much. This is the end of part 1 of a 2-part series about Teach for America. Fascinated by your group and what you do. And so we will see you again for part 2 shortly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve.